Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is? It is time for another episode of Thrive, turning uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. I am hanging out here with a very special guest, Dave Sanderson. He is not only a leadership expert, but he is one of the last surviving passengers on the Miracle of the Hudson. So we're going to get that and so much more as soon as we play this video and officially start the show. So again, Meredith Elliott Powell, it is time for Thrive. Here with my buddy, my partner, my special guest, Dave Sanderson. Dave, I have said you are a leadership expert. I have said that you are one of the last surviving passengers on the Miracle of the Hudson. But for those couple of people listening today that have not heard of you, what else do we need to know about Dave Sanderson?
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Meredith. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been in sales for 35 years. That's I started back in 1986 selling copiers door to door out of a van, and the code was do not bring it, but don't bring that copier back in here. So I had to really learn sales in the street. So I've been doing this for 35 years, and so I love sales. I think it's the most essential way to be able to not only drive revenue but also impact other people's lives. And fortunately, I used a lot of the sales things that I learned, techniques and strategies I learned on that day on the Hudson River, where you had to communicate and you had to do all these some of the things we had to learn to be able to get the outcome of not only survival, but having 100% survival rate. So, I'm very fortunate to do that. As you know, I'm a speaker. I do coaching, but more importantly, I write books. But I just love to impact people's lives and help them attain whatever outcomes they're trying to get.
Well, I really want to focus this show today on truly how sales has changed, leadership has changed, and what we need to do to thrive in an uncertain marketplace. But before we get into that, I think that we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Tell us your story. Tell us what you were doing on the plane that day, and try to help us understand what that was like and why it became the miracle that it was.
Well, thank you, Meredith. So here's the short version of a long story. I was coming back from a 3-day business sales trip. I was in a sales meeting in Brooklyn, New York, and we started the day at 5:00 and we got done at 10. So I got to go home early, which is a very rare occurrence in sales, right? You usually stay till the last moment. So I got on the plane. I was even scheduled to be on that plane. So I got on the plane that candidly, I was scheduled on the 5:00 flight, but nothing unusual. It was cold, it was snowing, but you've been in and out of New York, that's nothing new. And planes were delayed out of LaGuardia, and that's nothing out of the ordinary. But about 60 seconds after we took off is when I heard an explosion. And so then you knew something was going on, especially here in New York City. So you're what's going on? So all of a sudden, I think it's eerily quiet, and you feel the plane turning, and you're like, okay, we're going back to the airport. But as we know now, he wasn't turning back to the airport. He was actually turning the other direction, flying over the Hudson River, and he barely crossed. When he crossed over the George Washington Bridge when we really knew, and I knew it was a very serious situation because he only cleared the bridge by roughly about 400 feet.
Right.
And that's the moment. It's like, okay, this thing's going down, and I may not have another shot. So, but basically, hopefully, we know now that he got the plane down, but that was part one. Part two is when you have to get out of a plane that's sinking in ice cold water. Right. And that's when you had to incorporate all the skills because, first half, you basically had to manage your mind. Second half is like, now I got to go. So that's when I think, for me, the mindset had to really change to go back to the lead, because what happened on the right side of the plane, Meredith, what a lot of people don't know, is there were no crew on the right side of the plane. Wow. All the crew went out to the left side of the plane. So the right side of the plane had to be managed and led by people with zero experience. And that's when you find out how leadership's not about that situation. It's about how you lead people. Yeah. And that was not only a distinguishing factor, but a learning experience for me. It's like, you don't have to know everything about everything, but as long as you know how to lead people, instruct, communicate effectively, get them to take action, that's all sales. Yeah. So we do in sales. So That's pretty much, I mean, that's a very short version of what happened that day.
Why did the crew go out the left side and you went out the right side?
So what happened was the crew member who was supposed to be on the right side got injured in the back of the plane on impact.
Oh, oh,
Her leg got cut open, and they had to take her out the right front of the plane on the left. So that left no one on the right side of the plane. And so it was amazing how leaders stepped up and how people really, and it's amazing when, we talk about influence, right,
yeah.
in sales. Well, when you got people in a state of shock, state of uncertainty, as we talk about, right, you really got to pull out your influential strategies. And part of that is getting people to move their bodies. And that's one of the things that I did is because I've been with Tony Robbins for 10 years. He mentored me for those times when I was head of security. I usually use the things he taught me, how to get people to move their bodies and all of a sudden wake them up and take instruction. It was an amazing experience.
I mean, I could talk about this all day, and let's kind of integrate this into the rest of the interview because, certainly, we're not flying over the Hudson River and landing in ice cold water, but for some business owners today, it certainly feels like that. I mean, it just feels like you get one toe forward and you go 7 feet back. When I started writing and talking about uncertainty, it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, and every year it just seems to go on greater steroids. So, and a lot of times I feel like our customers are in a state of shock. They're in a state of, if nothing else, they're stuck, right? So where do you start? What are some of the biggest things that you need to begin to get people to feel comfortable? And how did you do that on that flight?
Yeah, thank you for that question. See, I think, the person with the most uncertainty in uncertain times becomes a leader. I truly believe that. So, and you just mentioned that we're in uncertain times right now, and as this keeps getting over and over, going, because one of the things I talk about, Meredith, is the last 2 years it was just not about COVID. It was about social justice. It was about the election. It was about police. I mean, it just kept stacking on all these people, these business people, and a lot of them don't know where to go. So one of the things I always want to make sure that they know I'm on their side. I am on their side, and I think people are looking for heroes right now.
Yeah,
and I've always strived to be the hero to my client. And so when I tell them, I'm the guy you're going to call at 2:00 in the morning. I will make it happen. Trust me, I will make it happen. And that's how that really turned my career around when I started taking that mindset of being the hero to my client. And I think I always start with that. And it always begins with a relationship. And, I don't do much prospecting anymore because I've got relationships now that people, I could call somebody and they know that I'll be the guy, there for them when all stuff hits the fan.
Yeah. You know what that makes me think of when I think about being a hero for the client? I think the first thing people need is confidence, right? Somebody showing up who says, I've got this. Even if I don't have all the answers, even if I don't know exactly what to do, you can count on me to be there and to figure it out. And that's a great first step with clients.
Yeah, I actually had that situation happen yesterday. The client called me and he got a call from his CFO in a panic. Give it to me. Let me handle it. And I had to do what I had to do on my side, but handle. And now he looks at me like, I know Dave's going to be there when all stuff hits the fan. Because, as we all know in sales, it doesn't just go smoothly all the time. There's going to be hiccups. And you got to bring certainty to your client. Clients want to be, I really think clients want to be led right now. Because they are in a state of uncertainty. So the person who can give the most certainty are the ones who probably get the most sales.
So what does that look like when you first show up with a client? Or let's even start before that. I mean, you're in a situation where you're not prospecting much anymore, but a lot of people who are listening to us are prospecting.
Right.
So what I love about this conversation is it isn't about the product you sell. It's what you're putting out there first. What does that look like, and how do you show up, and how does a customer sense or a prospect sense that you're different?
Well, thanks for that question, because one of the things I always start with, Meredith, is, I've really become I don't know, a master, but a focus on what modality does that person reside in, visual or kinesthetic. And I learned that by A, going to LinkedIn. That's a great resource. B, calling in and hearing how they talk, or talking to somebody in that organization or a third party. And once I understand what modality they're in, that's how I approach them. So there might be an instance where I approach somebody with a little video. There might be an
Mm.
instance if they're an audio person, I would definitely make it an audio, call them. But if they're a kinesthetic, it's more of a writing, a feeling kind of thing. So that is the first step I always do when I approach a new client is find out what modality they reside in, primary modality, and communicating with that modality. That's an instant connection, instant rapport.
Nice, nice. What do you think are some of the as the marketplace has really shifted. I mean, I'm working with clients that you've got to be the same way. I mean, their supply chain issue it's just a disaster. I mean, I've got one client where the sales team is going gangbusters, but they can't get a supply. You've got others out there that are worried about interest rates and possible inflation and where there'll be a slowdown. What do you think some of the biggest challenges or mistakes sales professionals and or leaders, really, I mean, I love your expertise on leaders, are making today?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes is they go in with their own agenda initially. And,
Mm,
I mean, we all get pressure. We all have pressure from management. Yes, and we've had this for years. But I think a lot of, especially younger people that I work with, Meredith, and probably you work with and speak with likewise, they're driven. They're achievement driven. They're getting these quotas. They think it's all about getting the number. But they got to flip it on the head and say, it's really about how I can serve first, coming from the
right.
servant leadership position. So that's what I say. I mean, I'm giving you a perfect example of what happened 2 years ago. I was in sales and COVID hits. And I was working primarily in healthcare and COVID hits. So, I mean, it was like a double whammy, right? Like, okay, what are we
Right.
going to do, right? So I took a different approach. I started calling the CIOs and some of the CFOs of the companies I was dealing with. And the first question I'd ask was, how can I help you? Right. Well,
Right.
and, and some people just take that as a lark. But one guy said, I'll tell you how you can really help me. I need to get masks in here because I can't get mask supply chains down. I said, give me a couple minutes. So I worked my connections and found him how he could source masks out of Indiana and got him 1 million masks in 72 hours. And all of a sudden, my name got out there. Right. And I wasn't
Yeah.
Dave, the sales guy. I was Dave, I'm getting you mask guy. And I
Right.
solved a problem totally outside my world.
Hmm.
That's how you make a raving fan out of somebody. To this day, he called me. I have a call with him this afternoon again.
Yeah. I call that urgent need. And when you got this is such good advice, audience. Really listen to this. What Dave just told you is when you go into a client, whatever it is that they are talking about, focus there.
That's right.
They couldn't listen to Dave until he found them masks. That people can't hear past their urgent need, right? What is some of your advice for your clients that are dealing with supply chain issues? I mean, I think that is just such a challenge right now.
Yeah, and I lived in supply chain now for almost 30 years. I think a lot of us who've been in this world of supply chain and systems knew this was coming. And so I think, I don't know if I'm better prepared, but
Wow.
at least I wrote about this yesterday on LinkedIn about the difference between networking and connecting.
Hmm.
So many people want to network with me. I say, I really want to connect with people. So, I think the supply chain issue right now is a real problem. And I think and especially in healthcare is a
Yeah.
major problem right now. So I think, the way I approach it is, I've got to understand the whole world of supply chain from their perspective, where they're going and the problems they're having, whether it's at shore in Los Angeles, getting in the port. And if I can understand, at least I can articulate the potential options or ways that the other options. And I tell you what, chief supply chain officers who have this problem will listen to you. They will
Hmm.
take your call. They will sit down. If you can give them some advice or give them a different direction, they will sit and talk to you. And I tell you that, I think that's for younger people. I think so many people, Meredith, you probably see it too, just jump right into the sale.
Yeah,
That's
it's
horrible.
funny. And so often, is what drives me crazy about sales training is that they train it all the same
Yeah.
way. And you're either taught, you jump to the sale too quickly, or you're taught this relationship building.
Yeah.
And you have to pay attention to who's in front of you. Nothing drives me crazier than when I call Verizon and they start asking me about how my weekend is. I'm like, I didn't call you for that. I called because my phone doesn't
That's
work.
right.
I'm 6 calls behind. Could you fix this? And then I'll talk about anything, that that you want to talk about. Then I had another guy when I called Verizon who I had still had a problem, and he just was talking to me about upselling me something.
Yeah, my next
And you,
service. Yep.
oh my gosh, it drives me crazy. I mean, you need to really, you need to really listen to people. But this thing about supply chain, if I'm understanding you correctly, because I think it is such good advice. If you're going to go in and deal with clients, you need to understand supply chain,
Right.
and you need to understand your clients' supply chain.
Right.
Like, I was just working with a client, and their supply chain is desperately broken. But one of the challenges with the supply chain is it's kind of amazing it ever worked. There's so many different countries
Yeah.
involved in their supply chain that they were just kind of hanging by a thread anyway. And all it took was one little thing not to go right, and the whole thing would cascade down. So I imagine in those types of situations, I mean, I just took a roll up our sleeves, let's get to work. I don't know the answer, but we'll try to figure this out together approach.
That's exactly right. I think what COVID did was expose the supply chain.
Yes.
If nothing else, it exposed how many people's supply chains were broken. They never paid attention because, candidly, the materials management and supply chain people and organizations are usually the lowest looked at people.
Yeah.
It's finance or IT or somebody, HR. But these guys are the lifeblood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guys and gals are the lifeblood of how to drive revenue. And what's the primary reason we're doing this? Yes, increase stock prices, yes, but driving revenue. So if you can help somebody, help them, get the product so they can drive revenue, you're their hero. You will be their hero for life. And you're here on a really topic that I'm passionate about, as you can tell, because so many years people just say, you know what, we've got supplies. What's the big deal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, you just sort of look and realize that that things show up, which kind of leads me to another topic. A really good salesperson, and obviously you are one because you were way ahead of this, would be helping their clients get ahead of their challenges. They would have seen the supply chain problem coming and start to tip the client off. So what are some of the other challenges that maybe you see coming down the road as we look at this uncertain marketplace where salespeople can position themselves to be a hero with their clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'll give you, for instance, and I'll give you a response. My current mentor's name is Don, and this is his topic, how he can see the next 2 steps ahead. And what he did, and I'll give you this, and I'll answer the question.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, he's an entrepreneur. He was in IT, but he bought a plant in Athens, Georgia. It made, I forget, it's kind of a metal product. Shifted on its head to make sanitizer. Well, hand sanitizer. There's a lot of people doing that.
Right.
But what he did is he bought the plant and said, I'll guarantee in 72 hours you'll have this on your piled on your doorstep. And by goodness, no one else could do that.
Right.
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 So he saw 2 steps ahead. The problem wasn't the product. The problem was getting it to the person.
Yeah.
So my response is, what I always look at is the distribution. The product, that there's challenges with China. Yes, we should be onshoring more than we are, but that's for labor purposes and things that's not happening. Regulations are not happening. So the key thing is, how can I help with your distribution?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How can I get you the product in a more effective way? And sometimes that's a real hard topic to handle. But like I did with the mask, I use my connections.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so important to not network, but connect.
Yeah.
Because when you get, as you know this, Meridith, when you get stuff's breaking loose, you want to be able to call that lady or that gentleman up, say, I need your help, and they can make that thing happen for you, which makes you look like a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I think I hear you saying too, which is one of the mistakes I think salespeople make, is they stay away from the tough subjects. And you need to jump smack into the middle of those tough subjects, even if you don't know how to solve them. I mean, I look at supply chain. I look at the fact that, our customers are now starting to decide, will the market slow down? If it does, when will it slow down? How do I kind of secure myself in those situations? We're not dealing with a single customer right now that doesn't have a labor issue. So rather than running away from those issues, kind of get in the center of those issues. Would you agree?
I totally agree. I think, I've been doing this now for 36 years. So if I would say when I was starting, I would have run away as quickly as I possibly
Yeah,
could,
right.
right? But with one of the things about the years is you get wisdom,
Yeah.
and young people come to me all the time and want my wisdom. I said, you can't get wisdom. You got to go through the experiences, and you got to be able to relate and understand. So I think with years comes wisdom. So now with the wisdom, you can now understand how somebody may think, right?
Yeah.
And why, and anticipate. You know what? This guy or gal is 42 years old. They're in the middle of it. They've never seen this stuff before. By the way, I've seen this stuff before back in 1970s when we had a recession, right?
Yeah.
I remember we couldn't get gas.
Yeah.
So, now what are the other options? Can we solve your problem? So
Mhm.
it's all about solving somebody's problem and helping them drive to their personal, like you said perfectly. It's about what's important right now, your urgency.
Yeah.
Solve that and you'll have that next step.
Yeah, you solve that. You focus on what the customer needs and they'll buy your product. All of that will come eventually. But so much of what you've talked about is the importance of connection and having that network. I mean, so often when we're faced with a problem, our first response is what should we do? And I always say your first response should be who should you call? I mean, it's that there's no problem that you face that somebody else hasn't already faced it and hasn't already started to figure it out. And so, what is some of your advice around building a network in today's virtual world?
That's a great question because people ask me all the time, what do I spend most of my time? And it's really finding the who for the how. I
Mm,
spend so much time finding those people, right? Those who's that I can solve the house for somebody else. And I started that, Meredith, with me personally because I had a lot of hows am I going to get this stuff done, and I'm
yeah,
not good at a lot of things. I'm good at some things. There's a lot of things like spreadsheets I hate.
yeah, right.
Working on my so now 2 or 3 hours a day. What I do is I search. I go on LinkedIn. Who is the person or people or organization that has fixed these problems before? I'll make sure I connect with them some way. I'll work the connection some way. So then I'll who for my house. So I tell people I saw people's who for house. That's what I do right now.
Yeah. I love that right now, and and I think that I think virtual is a great way
Yep.
to connect with people. I've been amazed at. I just had somebody reach out to me this morning that saw me speak at an event and said, "I'd really love to have you talk with my boss. Could I set up a 15-minute chat with you?" And I said, "Absolutely.
Yep.
Please do." So the who for the how is a great thought. I mean, I think that. Um, Asking yourself who first, who could I
Right.
work with? Who could I reach out to? Who could I could connect to? It may not be that first connection you make. I mean, I may reach out to you with a problem and you don't know how to solve it, but you're going to connect me with somebody else who can move me a little bit closer to that
That's what
solution.
happened to the mask. I had
Yeah.
two connections. I took me two connections to find these masks in Indiana,
Yeah.
and it was like it was like Nirvana. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was like I mean, I was getting flooded with phone calls because this was a problem everybody had, and
Yeah.
everybody was looking to go to China with a K95 mask, and there was it was a 14 to 21 day ship, right, minimum, and plus you got all the regulations you had to go through, and now they have onshore. So that's what you said is perfect because that's exactly where if you're
Yeah.
a top salesperson, I'm looking for the who's, for the how for people, and all of a sudden you're the connector, and you're the one that's making it happen for them.
Yeah, and you do get that reputation, right? Which is the reputation you want, where everybody says, "I don't know, call Dave and ask him." I
Yep.
mean, and then people are coming to you. It is hard to believe, but we are just about to the end of this podcast. I like to close out with two questions,
Okay.
and you can answer them either way.
Okay.
Number one, what is your greatest advice for any entrepreneur, sales professional, leader out there who wants to thrive in uncertainty? And then, certainly, how do we get a hold of you?
Well, thank you. First, this is the advice I would give, and I really never share this a lot, but this has served me greatly. Is I measure myself backwards, and what is
Oh,
well, I really learned this. It came to me last swam with the Navy SEALs, went back in the Hudson River, and I had not swum since 1979, and I had focusing on that gap, right? How am I going to get it done? I'm doing the same thing 2 days from now, Meredith. But this year I focused on, well, look how much I've gained this year. Look how much I measure myself backwards. And I think
yeah.
if leaders and salespeople do that, look, listen, every day is not going to be pixie dust and sunshine. But if you measure yourself backwards, say, you know how much I've gained, your mindset changes. And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
once you get your mindset changed, you're in a mode of servant leadership. So that would be my biggest advice. And second, if someone wants to contact, I would love to just go to my website, davesandersonspeaks.com. LinkedIn is David Sanderson. Check me out. As Meridith, I honor Meridith because congratulations on your recent award. I saw that. It was amazing. And you're somebody we all strive to be. So just check me out. And if I can serve you, my new book's called From Turmoil to Triumph. You see it here in the back. It's being going out here pretty shortly. So love to check it out.
When is the book going to be released, Dave?
It's on Amazon right now, but we're going to do a major launch in September.
Okay.
And this is there's a reason behind that. So yes, I'm going to announce it actually this weekend, so you get a little preview.
Great.
New York, I'm in New York City, but we're going to do it in September and have a bigger launch. So, but if you go on Amazon now, you can get a copy, and I'd be honored if someone would check it out.
All right. Well, I really encourage people, make sure that link is in the show notes. I'm certainly going to go get my copy and read it, leave you a review, because the wealth of information you have is really just incredible. I love everything that you've said here today. And thank you so much for coming on and for being a guest. And thank you, audience. You have been incredible. I have loved the comments lighting up the chat. We're going to go to davesandersonspeaks.com to find out more about Dave. You really need to get in and hear his amazing story, not only of the work that he's done, but in his career and the things that he has come through. And then don't forget, join us right back here next week for another episode, another guest, and another powerful set of strategies that you need to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. We'll see you next week.